relationship between Europeans and Africans, we will note that there are certain basic things that have not changed despite all of the other things we look at. Despite integrationism, despite political and social change, there are things that are still basically the same and have been the same for the last 400 years. The real power of Black people, particularly if you talk about military power, has not changed fundamentally since the very time we met the European. You may find African countries now with jet planes and tanks that they've bought from Europeans, by the way, and still have yet to make. And you may think then that the Africans have entered into a modern era in warfare and so forth. But I would dare say that there's not a single African country that could really protect the interests of Black people against European power, particularly as that power moves out into space and can rain down on the African continent bombs and laser weapons and other weapons of various types. And African countries having no anti-ballistic system, no Star Wars system, no system to fight war in space, is literally defenseless. And yet they may fly the latest American jets, and in the face of American and European war power, we are still ultimately defenseless. That has not changed fundamentally in 400 years, ladies and gentlemen. The European economic control of this globe fundamentally has not changed either. The European control of information has not changed fundamentally either. The European control of definition, the definition of reality, the definition of what is and is not, has not changed fundamentally either, and that has been the case for a long time. The European tendency to degrade things African has not changed as well. You may now have a degree in computer technology. You may now have a job that pays you $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, but your fundamental relationship to the European has not changed one whit from the fundamental relationship between our African forefathers and his European slave master. For as you work your computers, you still work to the profits of Europeans. And so the fact that we've moved into the executive offices does not mean we've moved into power. Does not mean that the fundamental power relationship between Europeans and Africans have changed one bit. As a matter of fact, the moving of Blacks into the executive offices is an effort to maintain that power and to obscure that power behind a form of neocolonialism. I don't think it is an accident that the desegregation movement and the assimilationist movement in America parallel the neocolonial movement in Africa. As I often tell my classes, you as Black students are now being educated to put a Black face on white power and to help deceive your people into thinking because you got a job, we have moved forward as a people.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another live broadcast on the forecast. And first of all, shouts out to everybody that's out there listening. I appreciate y'all for coming through. Much love and respect. Um, Now, I guess I don't plan on being on here too long, but we'll see how it go. And I guess we'll continue on with Black History stuff. But I realize like I'm gonna probably have to make more videos for it, which take a long time. But we're gonna get there. We'll figure everything out. But anyway, one of the main reasons why I wanted to come on today was to shots not only talk about history, we'll go in a little bit more about that, but also, shouts out to Harriet Tubman, because the day that she died is March 10th, and I think she was born sometime around this time, so I know I probably won't be on here. So that's one thing that I do want to do is come on here and say shouts out to the real one, um Harriet Tubman, one that we all can hope to live up to. So much so that some black people don't think is real because they don't even have a, a fraction of the courage. So they have to be like, it's fake. So we'll go on. And yeah, man, shouts out to hopefully y'all can still hear me. Shouts out to Harriet Tubman, right? Who in 1913 on March 10th in New York died at 91 years old. And this sister had more courage than all of us today put together, right? To do what she did. And even she didn't fall for the John Brown BS, you know what I mean? So uh, let's see here.
Slavery, risking everything to save her family,
I can't hear.
leading a
All right, I'm gonna
military
go
route,
out and come back while I
championing the
play.
cause of women's suffrage. These are just a handful of the accomplishments of one of America's most courageous heroes. Harriet Tubman was born Araminta Ross in Dorchester County, Maryland, in the early 1820s. Born into chattel slavery, Araminta, or Minty, was the fifth of 9 children. 2 of Minty's older sisters were sold to a chain gang. Even as a small child, Minty was hired out to different owners who subjected her to whippings and punishment. Young Minty's life changed forever on an errand to a neighborhood store. There, an overseer threw a 2-pound weight at a fugitive enslaved person, missed, and struck Minty instead. Her injury caused her to experience sleeping spells, which we know of today as narcolepsy, for the rest of her life. Minty's owner tried to sell her, but there were no buyers.
Now, the thing is, with the sister, she would be like after this, um, after she got hit in the head, right? She was like, she would start seeing stuff, right? Like telling her that she needs to be free. Now, we all needs to get hit in the head if that's what it did, like in a more disrespectful way to us, right? Because that let her see the light and get whatever answers from whatever to lead her on the path that she would go on, right? So she took whatever was coming to her, which was probably her ancestors, letting her know how to get the job done, and she had the courage to do it.
For an enslaved person who fell into sleeping spells. She was instead put to work with her father, Ben Ross, who taught her how to lumber. Lumbering increased Minty's physical strength and put her in touch with free black sailors who shipped the wood to the north. From them, Minty learned about the secret communications that occurred along trade routes, information that would prove invaluable later in her life. In this mixed atmosphere of free and enslaved blacks working side by side, Minty met John Tubman, a free black man she married in 1844. After marriage, she renamed herself Harriet after her mother. Harriet Tubman's owner died in 1849. When his widow planned to sell off her enslaved human beings, Harriet feared she would be sold away from everyone she loved. She had heard of an underground railroad, a secret network of safe houses, boat captains, and wagon drivers willing to harbor fugitive enslaved people on their way north. So Tubman fled with 2 of her brothers, Ben and Harry. They eventually turned back, fearing they were lost. But in one of her sleeping spells, Harriet dreamed that she could fly like a bird. Looking down below, she saw the path to liberation, and in the autumn of 1849, she set out on her own, following the North Star to Pennsylvania and to freedom. Tubman returned to the South 13 times to free her niece, brothers, parents, and many others. She earned the nickname Black Moses and worked diligently with fellow abolitionists to help enslaved people escape, first to the north.
Now, the thing is, right? See, the way that they portray it, right? Because, and maybe we'll do it again, because a couple years ago I did this thing where they was trying to talk about the myths of Harriet Tubman, and I was showing you where a lot of black people pick up these talking points from. But she was in Maryland, right? And what they portray as the South, and I guess they go by the Mason Dixon line or whatever. Um, But she was in Maryland, right? So when she returned, she kept returning to Maryland to free her family. You know what I'm saying?
and later to Canada. Harriet Tubman worked as a Union Army nurse, scout, and spy during the Civil War. In 1863, she became the first woman in United States history to plan and lead a military raid, liberating nearly 700 enslaved persons in South Carolina. After the war, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution legally abolished slavery, while the 14th expanded citizenship and the 15th gave voting rights to formerly enslaved Black men. But she was undaunted and she persisted. She raised funds for formerly enslaved persons and helped build schools and a hospital on their behalf. In 1888, Tubman became more active in the fight for women's right to vote. In 1896, she appeared at the founding convention of the National Association of Colored Women in Washington, D.C., and later at a women's suffrage meeting in Rochester, New York. There she told the audience, "I was a conductor on the Underground Railroad."
And which is interesting, she just as a side note, she actually met Ida B. Wells at one of those meetings and held her child, and it was like passing down that energy, you know what I'm saying? And so that was kind of dope that they was in one place and Harriet Tubman held Ida B. Wells' child.
And I can say what many others cannot. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. As her fame grew, various friends and allies helped her in the fight to collect a veteran's pension for her service in the Union Army. In 1899, she was finally granted $20 a month. In a fitting twist of fate, the United States Treasury announced in 2016 that Tubman's image will appear on a redesigned $20 bill. Harriet Tubman died on March 10, 1913. Even on her deathbed at age 91, she kept the freedom of her people in mind. Her final words were, "I go away to prepare a place for you." If you're inspired by Harriet Tubman,
Right. And it's up to us to go on, like, to make sure we take care of what she, started us to continue what she started. Um, let's see.
Some lives are just so extraordinary, they sound like something
That's
all the different hats she wore. I mean, conductor, spy, nurse, general, suffragist. These weren't just job titles. They were whole chapters of her life. So let's get to know the woman behind all of it. Okay, so our story actually starts not with Harriet, but with a little girl named Araminta Ross. They called her Minty. She was born right into the brutal, harsh reality of slavery in Maryland sometime around 1822. I mean, from her very first breath, her world was defined by violence and forced labor. And the cruelty she faced, it's just hard to even imagine. As a child, she was beaten and whipped. But then, as a teenager, something happened that would change her life forever. And over
And I want y'all to understand that she went from going to slavery and doing everything that she had to do to escape to helping build black schools and black institutions and continued to fight all the way until her last words, right? And it's Negroes out here that don't even want to uh, be black that says this person isn't real, that wants to be part of America so bad but will never be part of America, as we will see during the Black History thing.
overseer, in a fit of rage, threw a heavy 2-pound metal weight and it hit her right in the head. That injury was devastating. It left her with lifelong seizures, but also these incredibly powerful visions, which she believed were messages from God. But here's the thing, that spirit of resistance, it was in her blood, and she had an amazing role model. Just listen to this. This is what her mother, Rit, told an enslaver who came to take her son. "You are after my son, but the first man that comes into my house, I will split his head open."
You see that? That's Harriet Tubman's mama saying, anybody that comes into my house, I'm gonna split their head open. Imagine if we had that same kind of energy, how all of us had this energy, how less bodies it would be. It's crazy.
Wow. Can you imagine? That kind of fierce defiance, that absolute refusal to back down, that's a lesson Minty would carry with her for the rest of her life. And that very lesson is what fueled the single most important decision she would ever make, the choice to run. This was it, her call to adventure. And just look at this. This document right here. This makes the danger so, so real. This isn't some storybook fantasy. It's a real runaway notice from 1849. She wasn't Harriet Tubman the legend yet. She was Minty, a fugitive, with $100 reward on her head. And that was a ton of
So it's newspaper articles and stuff. Well, because they used to put like ads for runaway slaves in newspapers and stuff like that. And I mean, you see here, right? Because I always find it interesting that John Brown somehow is real, but Harriet Tubman isn't, right? And you don't see the contradiction in that, but I see the mindset that we have. You know what I'm saying? Because what she did was so incredible that most of us don't have the courage to even stand in her shadow,
money back then.
let alone on her
Mindset
shoulders.
was just absolute. She wasn't just running away from slavery, she was running towards freedom. Her own words say it all. There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other. Think about that.
Facts.
No middle ground. It was a life or death choice, and she made it without blinking.
Ain't
And
no
the
lesser
journey
of two
itself,
evils, my guy.
absolutely staggering. We're talking nearly 90 miles on foot, all the way from Maryland to Pennsylvania. She had to travel at night with only the North Star to guide her. And all the while, you've got slave patrols, bounty hunters. The threat was constant.
Shouts out to
It
Matron
was
in the
this
building.
incredible feat of pure endurance and skill. Can you even begin to imagine what that felt like? That one moment when she finally crossed the line from Maryland into the free state of Pennsylvania? The entire world must have changed in an instant. Her own words say it best, how she felt like she'd been reborn, like she was in heaven. But here's what makes her a true legend. For Harriet, her own freedom just wasn't enough, not even close. Almost immediately, she decided to go back, to cross that dangerous line again and again, not for herself, but for her family and for so many others. This is when she became the famous conductor.
And it's so sick, right? Because I mean, the whole story has to be told where, according to like her husband, was dating somebody else. He was like, "Nah, I ain't going now. You gonna get us in trouble now, Harriet." And then the fact is, I ain't gonna. I'm gonna be real. Like, as far as like black, just me speaking as a black man, because I be a lot disappointed a lot because I see a lot of black men coming at black women who have done more stuff than they have done themselves, right? And it's really a fear thing. And this sister was like, "All right, then suit yourself. Stay with that other sister in slavery, then."
The one they called Moses. And her methods, I mean, they were just a masterclass in strategy and spycraft. She was brilliant. She traveled in the winter because the nights were longer, giving them more cover. She'd start her escapes on a Saturday because that bought them a critical head start before the runaway notices could be printed on Monday. She used
Those
disguises
Sundays is
and
important.
searches that were actually coded messages. And yeah, she carried a revolver, not just for protection, but to make sure that if anyone got scared and wanted to turn back,
Mm.
they wouldn't risk the safety of the entire group. And did it work?
And look, and even I'm not there yet because I'm like, I'm not as hard on the coons as she was. I'm like, now she's right though. You know what I'm saying? Like, you cannot risk the safety of the rest of us. It ain't for them, it's for you. In case I ain't worried about them. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna put them down. But if you put us out there, then it's over for you. You know what I'm saying? You ain't gonna get the rest of us hemmed up.
Work? You bet it did. Over the course of about 13 incredibly dangerous trips, she personally guided around 70 people to freedom. 70 people, including her own elderly parents. Just think, every single one of those journeys was a life completely transformed. And people took notice. The great Frederick Douglass himself, I mean, this guy was one of the most famous abolitionists in the world. And he wrote to her, basically saying that her quiet, dangerous work in the shadows was more heroic than almost anything he'd ever seen. Coming from him, that's just wow.
Yeah, me
You've
too, man.
probably heard her famous quote, "I never ran my train off the tracks, and I never lost a passenger." That wasn't just bragging, it was a fact. Her record was perfect. She never, ever lost a single person.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, I lost several Negroes, so I can never get on that level, as I've already lost a few.
But her fight was bigger than just rescuing individuals, one by one. When the Civil War exploded, she saw a chance to go after the whole rotten system. So she went back south, but this time she wasn't just a rescuer. This time she was a soldier. And the scale of her impact just went through the roof. Just think about this for a second. In 8 years on the Underground Railroad, she guided about 70 people to freedom. But during the war, in one single day on a military raid, she helped liberate over 750 people in one day. This was a whole different ballgame. So, how'd she do it? She became a spy and a scout for the Union Army. She'd go behind enemy lines and gather critical intelligence. The perfect example is the Combahee River raid. She's the one who guided Union gunboats up this treacherous, mined river in South Carolina, leading them straight to the plantations where they could free all those people. And get this, because of her role in that raid, she is widely considered the first woman to ever lead an armed military operation in U.S. history. Let that sink in. A woman born into slavery who couldn't read or write, planned and led a successful military raid. She is, without a doubt, a true pioneer. Okay, so the war ends, slavery is abolished. You'd think her story would end there, right? A well-deserved rest? Nope. For Harriet Tubman, the fight for justice was a lifelong commitment. It was far from over. And this timeline, it's kind of heartbreaking, honestly. After everything she did for the Union, spying, scouting, leading raids, you know what she got paid for 3 years of service? $200 total. It then took
And
her
that's
decades of fighting just to get a
now the thing is though, freeing 750 people in one day is priceless, right? But yeah, what do you expect from whatever? But this is another important topic. You know, a lot of the black leaders and black people in positions that have sacrificed whatever they had to do to help us, we don't like really take care of them. Like we don't, like she should have been living like a queen for the rest of her life, but she was fighting the fight the rest of her life. Right? She, no matter how little she got, no matter whatever, she was down to fight until her last breath, and her last breath was like, "Hey, somebody else take my spot." Right? Then you had Ida B. Wells in there, you know what I'm saying, doing it, and it's the same thing, right? Um,
pension from the government she served. They finally approved $20 a month, not long before she died. And yet she never stopped. She just kept fighting. She settled down in Auburn, New York. And what did she do? She cared for her family, of course. She worked side by side with Susan B. Anthony, fighting for women's right to vote. She
Stop.
became a powerful
Yeah,
public
them
speaker.
white people, they
And
always
she
try to sneak
established
it in there.
homes for the elderly and the poor.
We'll
Her
get to
mission
that in a
stayed on
second.
business expanding to help anyone who is left behind. And now
You
all
see how they sneak in there. Oh, she was a feminist and like, you know, the struggle for women's rights and Susan B. No, you think these sisters was stupid enough to not know that this racist white bitch was a racist white bitch? You think they didn't know that? Like, come on. And we're gonna talk about that when we get to the Black History part, you know, because they are the most dangerous
all these years
species.
later, her legacy is bigger than ever. So big, in fact, that there's a plan to put her face on the $20 bill. I mean, how incredible is that? To go from being a
All right. And just to end it here, never mind the brother in the hat here, but just listen to his words.
Anybody even know who Harriet Tubman is? Y'all know who Harriet Tubman is? Harriet Tubman said this. Harriet Tubman said, I freed hundreds of slaves. Did she say that? She said, but I could have freed thousands if they would have knew they were slaves. And she meant that, man. She meant that. Do y'all Anybody in here know who Harriet Tubman is?
Damn, I was mute that whole time, and it's probably for the better. Um, that's what I was about. That's what I was saying, matron. Because like, damn, if they don't argue, I ain't no slave. I ain't no damn slave. They be like, yes, sir, master. I'll be there first thing in the morning, sir. And then I'd be like, hey, you a slave, brother? And they be like, I ain't no damn slave. I ain't no damn slave. I as a American, I was free. The 14th Amendment, brother. And I'd be like, bruh, like I can free you. Like you just say you a slave. No, hell no, I ain't no damn slave. Like damn. And if she was able to free people still, like you know how powerful she have to be, because they still argue with me. What 300 years later that they ain't no slave, still arguing, and that's like yes sir, I'll be there at 6 o'clock in the morning, sir. Uh, they don't believe that exists, matron. They don't believe it exists. Um, that's why it's hard to free them.
Anybody in here know who Harriet Tubman is? Y'all know who Harriet Tubman is? Harriet Tubman said this. Harriet Tubman said, I freed hundreds of slaves. Did she say that? She said, but I could have freed thousands if they would have knew they were slaves. And she meant that, man. She meant that. Do y'all know how many slaves she lost on the Underground Railroad? Not a single one.
Damn, that's incredible.
That's powerful.
I lost one on damn YouTube. I lost several on YouTube already, and she ain't do one. Not lost. She didn't lose not a single one, in a way tougher everything. You know what I'm saying? You know how incredible that is. And they still arguing to this day that they ain't no damn slaves. Don't call me no slave. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, brother, you's a slave, and I can free you if you can only recognize that. No, I ain't no slave. Now I get paid $20 an hour, and um, nah, I only gotta work 15 hours a day and pay all of my bills, which take up most of my money, and then go to these high-ass grocery stores and pay for my gas and all that stuff. But my brother, I can do what I want to do. And I guess technically you can quit a job if you want to. But anyway, shouts out to the great, great, great Harriet Tubman, you know what I'm saying? And I guess she was born somewhere around this time, and she passed away 2 days from now, like 113 years ago or something like that. So shouts out to her. Probably one of the few last real warriors that of our people. I don't know. It was a lot of warriors after her, but definitely among the best. These is people we would put on the sides of mountains. You know what I'm saying? Actual heroes, not you know. But anyway, and you think she was stupid enough to believe that? But I'll skip this one until we come back Wednesday, and we'll just go to the Black History part. And how some black soldiers went to go fight with the British, and some black soldiers stayed to fight with the Americans. All right, okay, so yeah, the original lesser of two evils debate, right? The origins of the lesser of two evils. All right, you're not free enough to do what you want to do, because if you stop working, you stop being able to pay for the life that you live, no matter what you are a slave to the cost of living. Yeah. I'm trying to tell them that, but they don't know. It not only says except for, because we all know that. Go watch the documentary on that or something. But what people seem to skip over is that 13th Amendment says involuntary servitude. So what, you can volunteer to be a servitude? How can we get them to do that? Well, they're going to need to pay for their lights, their gas, their air soon. But looking here, because we've been talking about the Revolutionary War and all that stuff, and the lesser of two evils here, right? The lesser of two evils. Because, you know what? I'll even play this one first, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of people feel this way. here now that a lot of people seem to be pretty scared now.
Go fight for your country. If you voted for Trump, it's like AJ Sanchez. Why aren't you registering for the military? Go fight for your country. If you voted for Trump, this is your war. You should not have to mention a draft or anything like that because this is what y'all voted for. And then if you're on ICE, you should automatically get registered. Y'all first, actually.
Guess what?
Guys, let's check these clips out.
Hey MAGA, you stupid, dumb, ugly bitches. This war is your fault. If you voted for that Rod Orange, you voted for this war. Therefore, y'all should get your asses out on those front lines. Women for Trump, blacks for Trump, Latinos for Trump, gays for Trump. I need all of you guys to end.
Now, it's pretty weird here now. Now, I know y'all gonna judge me because of y'all put politics over politics first, you know. But it sounded kind of weird to me that a mulatto was saying that. But okay, you know, fair enough. We'll skip that point for now. You know, we'll accept the y'all master's theory of blackness, and she's included in blackness for the second.
List and deploy out today. You know what? I'm also going to add the people who didn't vote. This is also your fault. Get your asses out there. Jill Stein voters, get your asses out there. If you were here online talking about don't vote for Kamala, don't vote for Kamala, get your asses out there. This is y'all's fault. Your president caused this war, so you need to go out and fight for your presidents.
Now, see, I don't think that she understands, you know, especially I know for me, it ain't my war. I can tell you that right now because I don't have this notion. See, people come from this idea of we have to save America because if America crashes, then all of us are going to be screwed. You know what I'm saying? Because we have been so integrated into another system that's like to take the roots out of something is to destroy it. So it might will destroy us, you know what I'm saying? But it has to be this way, you know? And it doesn't have to be this way, but it seems that it's the way that it's going. I'll just say that. Now, the thing is, I have no desire to save America or to fight for it, or whether it be to vote to save it or to go fight with a gun to save it. Right? If I'm going to save anything to fight or whatever, it's going to be for black people, you know? But the question that I have is like, what are our goals, right? Because both sides seem to be convinced that we have become their citizens, and it ain't no more Harriet Tubmans no more. You know what I'm saying? Um, and I get it, right? Because that was the first discourse, right? The first lesser of two evils, right? So which side should we pick? You know, and Harriet Tubman came later with the Civil War, right? That was another lesser of two evils, I guess, you know. But the original lesser of two evils was doing this revolutionary war. What side do we choose? And we have this thing that's which is like our beliefs stem from it that somehow we are responsible for saving everybody else, other people's country, other people's stuff. We got to go join to fight and whatever it is on both sides. Like I got Negroes in ICE and Negroes in the military and also Negroes in the Rainbow Coalition. But there is a lack of Negroes in the Black Coalition. All right, that's the crazy part. So no, you don't understand because I'm sorry though, you know, and this I might seem cruel for this, but it has to be this way because it could not be this way, but it also might have to be this way because if it doesn't get destroyed, then we'll never get off of it. You know what I'm saying? That's the way that it seems to me, you know. And I thought that the point was to build our own stuff and to get away from their system, not to make sure we uphold it and all that stuff. And I get it, you know, but that's because we're too plugged into the system, you know what I'm saying, is a wrap. We need to understand that we have to fight two enemies in this fight. There is no such thing as the lesser of two evils, and we are all we got, right? That's what I'm trying to tell you, right? See, like they'll be like, well, a vote for them is a vote for this person. It is not, right? It is I'm going to mind my own business in this case, right? And people want to be like, oh, look at it, look what they're doing, like, and I don't want to. But this is what the corporation of America does and has to do to maintain power, no matter who is the president. I don't understand what we don't get. The every like couple years, the gas prices go sky high. Just for my lifetime, maybe I'm missing something because I'm not old enough to see something here. Maybe it's something that we have to save for the moment. You know what I'm saying? And then worry about ourselves every next time there it could possibly be. Or I just think that the rug might just have to be pulled from under us, you know.
It's so baffling to me the
What
amount
up,
of
my
people I
brother?
see online talk about this.
And yo, my brother Anthony, you missed it. I had to shout out to Harriot Tubman. You know, she died in 2 days from now, like 113 years ago on March 10th. I think she was born somewhere around this time too, so it could be her birthday today. So we'll just say that, you know.
This war is great. I love this. President Trump is the best. Blah, blah, blah. This is all for the American people. Blah, blah, blah.
Now we're gonna ignore the whole mulatto aspect to all of this, but you have to understand though, like it's black people's mentality of, well, this is where we're Americans, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's on both sides, and we don't seem to recognize that, you know what I'm saying? And you talking about black power and like, well, like what does that mean to you? Does that just mean being comfortable in America, or does that mean having your own stuff? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what to tell you. So let's continue forward with history, and we'll go through as
So with
much as
the
we
lesson,
can
I kind
here.
of want to just focus on what happened with the black people that sided with the British.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the first lesser of two evils, right? Because hey, if we side with this group, they're gonna do this for us, or if we side with that group, now they say they're gonna do this. But let's see the results of what happens every time that we pick the lesser of two evils. We'll see. It's still evil, isn't it?
And the black people that sided with the Americans, and see if either side kept their word to black people. Now, after 8 years of war, it finally ended with what they call the Treaty of Paris. But pretty much Britain just agreed to recognize America as a separate nation.
All this is like technical stuff, all right. So I guess I'll skip it for now. Y'all can go back and
In
watch it.
certain lands to the west. So now America was free to colonize as much of the land as they wanted to, or that they were able to. But also during this treaty, parts of Florida was given back to the Spanish, which is going to come back into play a little bit later in future lessons. But the Spanish was able to get parts of Florida back during this treaty too. But now that the war was over, all of the black soldiers who sided with the British, which they call the black loyalists, but every black person that sided with the British was forced to leave America. And in New York, over 3,000 people alone were sent to places like Nova Scotia, Canada, and other British
Yo, and it's funny, I had the same point before y'all even started saying lesser of two evils. Well, I guess y'all been saying it, but before I start saying it.
territories in Canada.
When the war was over and the British had lost, the British soldiers, collectively called Loyalists, left for Nova Scotia. 3,548 black Loyalists landed in Halifax between 1783 and 1784. Over half of the black Loyalists settled in Shelburne County, mainly settling in Birchtown, named for Samuel Birch, who signed their freedom papers. Each Loyalist was promised 100 acres of land plus additional acreage for each family member. Unfortunately, with such a large influx of immigrants, the matter of receiving land was difficult. White Loyalists took precedence over their black counterparts. When black Loyalists did receive land, sometimes after waiting years, they received a significantly smaller amount of land than they were promised. Furthermore, the land they received was rocky and not suitable for crops. Most black Loyalists could not afford to have their land surveyed and therefore could not build on it. They had to dig holes to live in order to survive the winter months. Life for the black Loyalists was far from the promised land they envisioned. While the black
Yeah, facts, my brother, facts. And also you see that, right? So then when they do get land, it's the land that nobody wants, right? And I had something about them taking land. I guess I should have played it, but I'll save it for Wednesday or whatever. So it is what it is.
Black Loyalists were free. There were still many enslaved Africans in Nova Scotia, and for the white citizens, there was no difference between a free black and an enslaved one. Furthermore, Birchtown was a haven for escaped slaves who could hide from their masters among free blacks. This upset white citizens who felt they were losing their property. Furthermore, black loyalists were paid a quarter of the wages of a white man, and so employers were more likely to hire blacks as a source of cheap labor. This angered white citizens as they felt they were stealing their jobs.
Oh, so you mean the damn poor ones was the fucking crazy wild ones? That was because they was mad they wasn't able to get jobs because they was using exploited labor of black people who would do stuff for much. Well, you get paid. They got paid in their times $20 an hour too. You know what I'm saying? Since you ain't no damn slave, and there was the poor whites who was mad, huh? So that goes there. That theory of the poor ones being the ones you unify with, I guess.
Those who could not find jobs were forced to become indentured servants. Some black loyalists were even kidnapped and sold into slavery once again.
During Black History Month, Canadians might hear about the Black Loyalists, Black soldiers who sided with the British during the American Revolution and found refuge here, settling in Nova Scotia. What we don't often hear about is how those loyalists faced terrible conditions and that many of them left Canada for greener pastures in Africa.
You look around and you don't see anything that says there were black loyalists that were here who got on board 15 ships and settled across the ocean. It's amazing. It's a story that needs to be told.
This is Wayne Hamilton's story, one of searching for his roots. 2 centuries ago, Hamilton's ancestors came to Nova Scotia in search of freedom.
My sense is that after 3 or 4 years, the black loyalists really were having a real tough time of it.
So hundreds of former slaves made another journey, this time to Africa.
Some families probably were separated because maybe the brother didn't want to go, but one brother did.
It was here.
All right, now keep in mind, because that's the other art debate right now. I don't think that this debate today is the same as it was then, right? But y'all like to talk about that topic all the time about all right, especially, but it's different when you like deny stuff. But y'all have this topic today about whether we go back or whether we stay here, right? And it's different now, like I said, but this is not a new debate. You understand? This is like one of the first times it was debated over what 300 some years ago. And said the descendants of the black loyalists still live in Canada. Hold on. They created a community called Africaville. Some of them left to go to Sierra Leone. Yeah, exactly.
Here in Birchtown, black loyalists were promised land and settled. People here are working to preserve that story.
Once the largest settlement of liberated slaves outside of Africa, an unyielding coast where families were separated.
If you look around at the landscape outside, it's very rocky. And one would imagine how it did anybody scrape an existence between those rocks.
Inside this small museum is a copy of the famed Book of Negroes. Within it, the names of slaves who escaped to Canada. Free, but on unforgiving land. Many chose to leave, this time for Africa's shores.
Now, even though they say the British supposedly kept their word, of course they didn't. And most of the land and the supplies went to white people first. White people only, really. And the few black people who did get land, they got the worst land, the worst supplies. And of course, they still face the same treatment that free black people in America was already facing before their quote unquote revolution. And the thing is, a lot of the white loyalists were able to bring their own slaves with them to the same areas. So the British actually accommodated white slave owners more so than the black loyalists who helped them fight the war. And you already know many of the white people in these places didn't see any differences between us Negroes. Only we see differences between us. But other groups don't see differences between us.
Facts.
They didn't care
Only
if
we
we
see
were free or
differences.
enslaved. They treated us all the same. And by this point, most enslaved people was just running away anyway, right? And just blending in into Black communities. And of course, Black people was, even in those situations, helping each other get freedom. Now, another thing that was pissing the white loyalists and the white people up in Nova Scotia and Canada and the places where Black people went was that Black people were the more skilled laborers. And not only that, companies or employers would only pay them half or a quarter of what they paid white workers. So not only were they getting better laborers, they were getting it at a cheaper price. And there was no way for these poor white people to compete for jobs, which made them more angry at the Black community. And of course, they start randomly attacking Black people, right? They would face violence. And in a lot of cases, they started kidnapping Black people, especially kidnapping children, and selling them back into slavery, not only to make a profit, but just out of pure hatred for Black people. And this was happening so much that it became a business. And as we go on throughout the lessons, we'll see this business practice of them kidnapping and stealing, especially Black children, and how some of the laws, like the law even George Washington passed, right? The Fugitive Slave Act. But, hopefully we'll talk about that on the next one. But as
All right. My brother said some of the Black loyalists were settled in Trinidad, where they were given plots of land. Today, their descendants are known as the Americans. All right. Yep, definitely. Yeah. And look, right, this lesser of two evils, because we'd be like, if we go here, we settle with them. Some Black people sided with the British, right? They were the lesser of two evils, right? Because dude came in here and said, hey, the
When you make men slaves,
Emancipation Proclamation, if you will.
you deprive them of half their virtue and compel them
What's
to
going
live
on, Ra?
in a state of war. Are there no dangers attending this mode of treatment? Are you not hourly in dread of an insurrection? Olaudah Equiano.
Promised freedom to any enslaved man owned by a rebel who was willing to take up arms and help suppress the uprising.
Britain is the biggest slave trading nation on earth. Nevertheless, the British believe that if they can convince enough slaves to abandon their masters in the South, to take up arms against the American rebels, that this...
Now, again, it makes sense, right? Because this is the first time they had the lesser of two evils debate. Because maybe I would have got involved, like, yeah, maybe the British, maybe they're telling the truth now. Like, maybe these are the good ones, you know what I'm saying? Or because later on, as we see, George Washington did the same thing. Once he started losing the war, he said, oh, well, we'll give you your freedom too, right? And I guess we talked about that a little bit, but maybe in this first debate, I would have joined in with y'all and had that debate about the lesser of two evils, right? And said, no, this is the lesser of two evils, right? This is the good side of the cracker, you know what I'm saying? Or this is the good side of but I don't live in that time, so I can't have this conversation with y'all, so.
This is a manpower pool that can also derange the economies of the southern states.
It's not that the British are anti-slavery by any means in the 1770s, right? Their colonies in the Caribbean are their most profitable colonies in the Americas. They are firmly committed to slavery. But opportunistically, when they think that they can encourage slaves to rise up against rebelling colonists, they'll do so.
You know what? I should get off this one because they think they own our history too. Like they'll try to be like, "Hey, you can't employ it's shut the hell up." You know what I'm saying? Because they want to frame it the way they want to frame it, but we look at it from Black point of view here. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're learning to do. How to look at this stuff from our point of view here.
Of Matthew de Costa, who worked as an interpreter and a translator for the French in their interaction with the Mi'kmaq people. Matthew de Costa was a free man. However, as the century progressed and more Blacks arriving in Nova Scotia, they came as enslaved people. Later on, the New England planters brought in hundreds of enslaved Black people from New England. Between 1777 and 1783, 3,500 Black loyalists arrived from the United States. These loyalists had fought for the British during the American Revolutionary War. Additionally, 2,000 enslaved people owned by white loyalists also arrived in Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. In 1796, around 600 Maroons arrived from Jamaica. These Maroons had been deported from the island by the British. Later on, the Maroons migrated to Sierra Leone. Between 1813 and 1817, at least 3,000 people, called the refugees of the War of 1812, also arrived in Nova Scotia. Like the Black loyalists, they had fought for the British during the late war, which was the war.
All right, so as we see on that side, they still was leaving, and over here they was coming up with the national anthem in the War of 18. We'll get to there later. We ain't there yet, so.
1812. In 1834, slavery was abolished in the province. However, this did not mean social and economic equality for Black people. Black people continued to face restrictions on their lives and on their livelihood, such as segregated schooling, restriction in public places of entertainment, and economic injustice. Blacks around the world, however, continued migrating to Nova Scotia between 1813 and 1865. We have folks arriving from the United States on the Underground Railroad. And at the end of the century, or as the century progressed, this is the 19th century, you had Caribbean merchant seamen and their families arriving in the province. In the first 3 decades of the 20th century, around 600 persons from the Eastern Caribbean arrived in Cape Breton Island to work in the coal and steel industries. Despite the racism.
All right. So yeah, I guess we can look at more stuff about the Black loyalists and stuff like that. But I mean, we can even look today at
the Nova Scotia government should apologize to Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian communities for a history of environmental racism. That's one of a list of recommendations from a panel tasked with looking into the harms caused by previous provincial decisions. The draft report details some of the history of environmental racism, including dumps and toxic waste areas, the relocation of Member 2 First Nation, and the destruction of Africville. It calls for a community-led body with decision-making powers that has a working
So there you go. My brother mentioned it, and they set out to do what they can to destroy it.
For a community-led body with decision-making powers that has a working relationship with the toxic waste areas, the relocation of Member 2 First Nation, and the destruction of Africville. It calls for a community-led body with decision-making powers that has a working relationship with the province. The government says racism is unacceptable, but stops short of committing to a formal apology.
This is serious business. I think.
Wait, hold on. Was the apology the thing that we wanted? Was it to make them pay for what they've done? Just depends on the concept that we have here. You know what I'm saying? This was the lesser of two evils, of course. So
steps we have to take in terms of dealing with racism are something we have to hear from community, hear from the experts, and make sure we make the proper steps so we can move forward as we're doing with the process we're going through at the current moment.
The report also calls for reparations to be made. The minister says a meeting with panelists is scheduled sometime.
That's right. Pay that money, fool. All right, here we go. I'll play this one for you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This government is leaving Black Nova Scotians behind, so it's not all Nova Scotians that this government is addressing. They sat on the environmental racism report until it was leaked.
Now they got a different president now, so what's the excuse here now? They got a damn different president. Shouts out to Marie, Joseph, and Jalique, an enslaved Black woman in Canada who set a fire that burnt most of the city of Montreal. They executed her, but she did her job, you know? Another one of those great heroes, you know? Like so many.
And they still won't act on those recommendations. And now they're slashing programs for Black and African Nova Scotians. Programs that our youth, our family, and our communities depend on. So, Madam Speaker, why? My question is for the Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs. I would like to know, how can this government possibly justify these cuts? And can the minister please explain?
Why does it sound like they having the same issues we having? And that's something in the long run, it sounds like there ain't no such thing as a lesser of two evils, you know what I'm saying? I guess it depends on what your perspective is, you know.
I recognize the Honorable Attorney General and the Minister of Justice.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to table a document after I'm done reading it, an answer to this question, as to to Lisa Young, who is the chair of the Environmental Racism Committee panel. I am writing to let you know that other former environmental racism panel members know that Budget 2627, Defending Nova Scotia, was tabled yesterday, February 23rd. I'm pleased to share that the budget of $935,000 in funding over 2 years to support work and response that you provided to our government. Madam Speaker, we're getting the job done in supporting this. We are working with that panel. That panel is very satisfied, and we put the budget dollars behind it, Madam Speaker. I'll table that.
Before I move on, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything about this job, but I do not like members from the floor telling me how to do it. I'm starting to get cranky. Maybe I was born with it. Maybe it's that group. Needham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was asking that question of the Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs and the Minister of Justice who stood up. It was just plain disrespectful to change. Madam Speaker, I have to speak my piece, because when I ask a question of the African Nova Scotian Affairs Minister about African Nova Scotian affairs, I expect them to stand and speak on that. So here are just a few of those cuts. Promoting leadership and health for African Nova Scotians, gone. Summer Scholar Program for African Nova Scotians, gone. Transition Year Program that had 50 years in this province, gone. Community resource support. I could go on and on and on. But I have a question. What does the Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs say to our communities who will be left behind because of these cuts?
All right, there. All right, I was about to say something mean. I shouldn't say it, but you know, I'm gonna say it anyway. The Canadian Jasmine Crockett here, you know what I'm saying, is asking questions, and fair and legit questions, because nobody said these ain't fair and legit questions, or that, yes, we understand how they work, but do we really understand how they work? Because this sounds eerily familiar to what's going on, you know, here today. Let's see. Lord have mercy.
Budget. That's not accidental. That's a choice.
So,
We keep hearing about fiscal responsibility.
there you go. No different here. All right, let's continue on, because this is another interesting part of the lesser of two evils. Now, the first, what they say, documented race riot, which we know is not the first, you know, but they say the first documented race riot in North America was there in Canada, right? The Shelbourne riots. And I'll give you one guess as to the reason why the first, as they claim, the first uprising or race, quote unquote, race riot happened, right? The tears of, you guess, you know.
The kidnappings increased and the violence increased. It eventually led to a full-blown race riot in 1784 known as the Shelburne Riots.
David George, a Black loyalist and Baptist preacher, founded a church in Shelburne shortly following his arrival in Nova Scotia. He attracted both white and Black churchgoers. Tension started to grow when George began baptizing white citizens and came to a head when he baptized a white woman. On July 26, 1784, 40 disbanded white loyalists tore down George's home and about 20 homes of Black loyalists in the area. The Shelburne riot is considered the first race riot in North America. George continued to preach, but the white loyalists returned and beat him with sticks, chasing him into a swamp. The rioting continued for 10 days, with trips into the Black communities lasting into August when soldiers were dispatched to deal with the issue. As a result, a dusk to dawn curfew was issued for all Black citizens, and the Black loyalists were now completely left out of land deals. The victims of the Shelburne riot were being punished.
Now, even though they try to give this credit for being the first full-blown race riot in North America, and that was in Canada, we have seen several already, so we know that this is not the first. But the Shelburne riot started because a popular Black preacher named David George, who led a church and preached to mostly Black people, but there was some white people as well. And many white people already felt that a Black person shouldn't be preaching to white people. But when this brother David George had the nerve to baptize a white woman, they were pissed. Think about that. They try to act like Canada is something different. The first race riot, according to them, in Canada started because a Black preacher baptized a white woman. And most of the white dudes were angry. And the first thing they did was resort to violence against this preacher baptizing somebody. That same day, a lynch mob burned down David George's house along with 20 other Black homes. And that was just on the first night. And for the next 10 days, mobs continued to destroy, loot, and burn Black homes and destroy our property. Now, even though there's no official record saying that anybody was killed, the actual number of people who were probably murdered is unknown, right? Many people believe that many people were murdered, right? Countless people were injured. And by the time it was over, all but a few Black people ended up leaving town, except for the people who were servants and slaves. And the few Black people who chose to stay for whatever reason, they were treated worse than before and were most likely treated no different than the slaves that were still there. Now, most of the Black people that left Nova Scotia and Shelburne ended up going to Sierra Leone after Freetown was established there in 1787 by 400 former slaves who had been sent from London over there.
In 1787, English ships sailed towards Sierra Leone. Aboard were 380 freed slaves, ready to start a new life in modern-day Freetown. This proved to be the start of a disastrous experiment. We'll hear why in a bit. They were newcomers to Africa, despite, ironically, their forefathers having been transported as slaves across the Atlantic. This group of freed slaves were the first group of Africans to be sailing in the opposite direction. Where they landed, they found native Africans that had settled there more than 6 centuries ago. They were probably the ancestors of Sierra Leone. These people were the Limbas, the oldest ethnic group in Sierra Leone, the coastal Burlom, Tine, and the Mande-speaking people, including Vai, Loko, and Mende. So, when the newly freed slaves arrived, abolitionists who had freed them had to negotiate with local chiefs about their resettlement. Disputes over the territory emerged shortly after. Additionally,
the white colonists negotiating with the Africans about the Africans coming back to Africa. That makes sense.
not long after that, that first group of resettled slaves sadly died from disease and hunger. Later, In 1792, the experiment was tried again. Nearly 1,200 black loyalists, that's African Americans who served the British Army in the American Revolution and they were living in London in difficult conditions, traveled across the Atlantic to settle in Freetown. Then, a third group of freed slaves, the Maroons, traveled to Sierra Leone colony from Jamaica in 1800. By the late 19th century, the new settlers were becoming part of the Creole ethnicity, often called Creole in modern-day Freetown.
Now, the settlement was originally called Granville, but after they had issues with local African tribes in the area and then with diseases, it ended up failing and they had to abandon the settlement. But in 1792, the British sent 1,100 black loyalists back to Sierra Leone and they officially established Freetown. Now, there were some issues. They tried to work together with tribes who had already been in the area. But, it was constant divisions and tribalism.
Now I get some of this stuff is controversial, so if I'm wrong anywhere, you tell me where I'm wrong.
But many black families did leave America, go to Nova Scotia, right, or Canada, and ended up in Sierra Leone or different parts of Africa, right? Now, as far as the black soldiers that sided with the Americans, right, they got screwed over too. They didn't fare.
All right, now before we go to the other lesser of two evils, right? I guess it would be the Republican side today. Now, yeah, we seen this about the
With that, let's talk about where he comes from and the black loyalists. So, freedom and a farm. This was the slogan and the promise made by the British Empire to any black slaves who were owned by rebellious Americans. Now, it was also made to any who were seeking just freedom in general during the war and rose up in support of the British Empire. David George was, as an American, he was ultimately converted to the Baptist faith. And his emotional sermons drew in not just black settlers, but white settlers as well. They were entranced by how he spoke and what he spoke of.
love everybody.
Additionally, as his following grew and grew, he became the most famous pastor at the time in all of Nova Scotia. A free black man from America speaking about the plight of the black man in Nova Scotia and speaking to the hardships of the reality of life at this point in time, not just for black people, but for other settlers. He was enthralling. Spoke of
and in today's terms, he would have been saying black and brown if he was here today. You know what I'm saying? Pretty much. But he was like, oh, I guess they would say poor whites. Then I don't know who they would say. I don't know. You know how we do.
Liberty and justice, and spoke not of, differences between races, but how we are all God's children.
Is that true now?
He
preached this stuff. He preached it. All right. So I don't want what happened to him to happen to me. So I ain't gonna preach that to you.
Black people in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick as well at this point, he gave them strength. He gave them courage. And he even baptized white loyalists. He was so effective at this that he got white people to get over, some white people to get over their racism and let his hand touch them. And
now, after 300 years of more knowledge, we now understand that it may be a part of their Neanderthal DNA that you can't preach love to get them over it, right? We understand how that whole side works, right? The quote unquote, well, I mean, I guess a lot of us still have this white savior complex, and all we need to do is hear them say parrot one thing that we want to hear, and they get their black card. But
baptized them in new faith. This, of course, didn't sit well with a lot of other white people, and especially with colonial administrators who relied on the rigid racial hierarchy. Because of this, he raised the ire of local racists, and then this eventually turned to violence. And I mentioned this in one of my videos in that series on the unfortunately dark history of Canada. But it was the earliest recorded race riot anywhere in North America. And it was in Shelburne.
Which we know it was not.
On the 26th of July, 1784, a group of white people demolished George's home. And they also demolished those of 20 other free black people in the community. They used clubs and hooks to attack and maim various black locals just across the harbor from Shelburne in Birchtown. These riots and confrontations lasted 10 days. And after that, it would be known as the Shelburne Race Riots. And it's a stain that remains with Shelburne and Nova Scotia and Canada to this day. Or at least it should. Lots of people don't know about this, whether they're local to the Maritimes or not. And I wish more people knew about David George, the man who in many ways was...
Yeah, that you start talking that Christian love everybody stuff, it don't work. They might burn your stuff down, so don't waste your time. I wish we would learn our lesson there too. But we all know what they credited as the first race riot. We know why that it got started, right? Because of the most dangerous species in the universe, which is
my son left because my son knew that if he
white
stayed,
Neanderthal female.
Motherfucker wonder.
you
And
are
my
dating
brother is finally getting his
well
wake
being
up call
married
here.
to a black man. I want you to listen up. There are certain things that you need to know. And I don't think this is spoke about enough. But the most dangerous thing in this world are the tears of a white woman. And if you truly love the black man that you are with, you need to know that
truly love
his back
That's
and
funny.
protect him at all costs, including protecting him from yourself. And what do I mean by that?
First of all, how deranged is this? Why would you? Never mind. Never mind.
My son was dating a white woman. My son is biracial.
And that's a whole nother. You see, like now that's a whole nother rabbit hole subject here that we can't even go down right now. Her mulatto son dating a white girl. That's a whole nother topic, right? But damn, do you see the rabbit hole that it leads to? Right? It's crazy. Never mind.
They got into an argument in public, and she started to scream and cry. And my son immediately left the scene. She was outraged. She couldn't believe my son left. My son left because my son knew that if he stayed there and this woman was crying and screaming.
And this is why we don't assume that mulatto children are black in the first place, right? Because now it matters because it's her mulatto boy that has a drop of black blood in their society. Ain't that something?
At him, a black man, there was not going to be any questions asked. He was going to be thrown to the ground. He was going to go to jail. It was not going to be any questions asked because this white woman was crying and screaming about him. Now, I'm sure this female may have been hurt. Her feelings was hurt. She was a little emotional. However, When you are dating a black man and you're a white woman, you need to understand that sometimes your fucking feelings and your emotions have to take a fucking back seat to not cause harm.
All right, blah, blah, blah. All right, we know.
To the person you are dating, that you love, that you are married to.
No, also, it's not just their tears because they're lying Neanderthal white bitches, but that's a whole nother topic, you know what I'm saying? Um, and see, this is one of
And
the
there are
this is one of the
bad
problems
things in
with
America's history, but we are not back in our history.
now, this is one of the problems with the Negroes and some of the talking points that get adopted by us not knowing our society and our history, you know what I'm saying?
Let's get into this.
Black people were not the only ones discriminated against in America. I know they'd like you to believe that they were, but they're not, right? I, as an Italian American, when Italians came over here, we were heavily discriminated against. We were shoved into ghettos. We weren't allowed.
And you Negroes would be like, oh, Italians is black, Italians is black. Well, do we have to take a trip down the Italian rabbit hole? You know what I'm saying? We've done that already. We can do it again. I'm fine to do that, right?
To work certain jobs, we were looked down upon because of where we came from, right? The Irish, they came over as indentured servants. It didn't matter how much they.
Now, I had, which I presume is a mulatto boy, come on here and try to show me a picture of a little Irish boy and talk about what they should we go down that damn rabbit hole too, right? Because before it was black and brown, I guess we were saying in the seventh, whenever the hell it was, black and Irish, you black too. I guess today we'd say, oh, redheads is black too, or whatever the hell. I don't know what y'all be saying these days.
They worked because guess what? They weren't going to see that money anyway. So how exactly were they supposed to build generational wealth? You had Jewish people who were fleeing from the horrors of the Holocaust that didn't have a dime to their name.
The shysters, really? And what did all of them have in common? I guess we'll see when we get to the story throughout
They had
history.
nothing, and they were heavily persecuted due to their religion and due to their culture, right? And they figured it out. Each and every single one of those groups was able to figure it out because we put an emphasis on things like education, family, community, making a better life.
Now, notice she said all the groups that got adopted into whiteness, right? And she's not going to tell you how they got adopted into whiteness, right? By the way that everybody else tries to do it, by anti-black. In order for there to be quote unquote white supremacy, there must be black inferiority. It doesn't exist without black inferiority. You understand? And we, although some Negroes try, could never ever, well, they can't either, but we are at the opposite end of the spectrum. But anyway.
Each and every single one of those groups was able to figure it out because we put an emphasis on things like education, family, community, making a better life for ourselves rather than just sitting there and crying about the cards that we were dealt. I get it. It's not fair. And there are bad things in America's history, but we are not back in our history. But if we just sit there, then we are never going to advance. You are not the victim that you have delusioned yourself to be. And there are a lot.
And this, if she wasn't a Neanderthal, I would be surprised by the hypocrisy, right? Because here she is crying, being a victim, and telling, anyway.
Problems
This is
with
Neanderthal logic,
and
y'all.
their culture and what they put an emphasis on and how they dress and how they speak and what they think is important to them. And that is why they're still where they're at. And I don't say this out of hate. I say it because they could be so much more and they should be. And I want to see that for them. I want to see this better future for them. But it's going to have to take a lot of self-reflection and accountability in order for them to. Black people were not the.
All right, so before the Negro pops up to explain, let's just move on. Now the other debate that seems to pop up, which it may be instances before that, is should we in their case should they go back to Africa or Sierra Leone, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't like it is today, the kind of debate, because some of them was like, no, we need to stay here and build our own communities. And some people was like, no, I'm going back, right? So the debates that we have today is not new, you understand? And the debate over Sierra Leone among African Americans centered on the tension between immigration and as a true path to freedom and the duty to stay and fight for abolition in the United States. So some people wanted to stay and continue to fight for the people there, and some people was like, no, the only way we could be free is if we go back to Africa, you know? And while it wasn't like it was today, you know, where it's like hatred almost, you know what I'm saying? Um Now the problem is though, a lot of every time when you deal with Europeans and you try to do it, they still want you to pay them taxes, which don't make no sense at all. They still want you to pay them taxes, right? Um so some people like wealthy businessman Paul Cuffey argued that it was a it was a opportunity, right? Now, I ain't gonna say what it says, but it says a return to their mission, right? But many black abolitionists in the 1700s did not view Sierra Leone as a solution to U.S. slavery, and they argued that a mass immigration would drain the free black community of its leaders and its resources, effectively giving up on the millions still enslaved in America. Now, understand it was coming from a different point, though, right? They wasn't saying, "Oh, maybe we can have a shot at integration. Maybe we could be love them into loving us." They were saying like, "Yo, we cannot leave our people behind." You know what I'm saying? It's not that we shouldn't go back or none of that. It's that we should not leave our people behind. You know, and that's why it's important to understand that. You know what I mean? Um, so 1,200 people who came from America went to Sierra Leone in 1792, as we saw. Um, and people like Paul Cuffey began going there and just doing trade, you know what I'm saying, with the people. Even if you, it's still business opportunities, you know what I'm saying? So, um, let's see.
What's good, people? This is to history as Sengbe Pierre, also known as Joseph Sink, was a West African man of the Mende people who led a revolt of many Africans on the Spanish slave ship known as La Amistad. Sengbe Pierre was born around 1814 in Sierra Leone. He was a farmer and a
I guess
trader.
this is later. I guess I shouldn't have this now. This is the Amistad thing. But so yeah, I guess this is not now. We can skip this for now. Um, but anyway, I guess we'll just um
During the American Revolutionary War, over half of the black loyalists settled in Shelburne County, mainly settling in Birchtown. The Shelburne riot is considered the first to force many black loyalists to become indentured servants, a form of slavery in which a person would enter into a contract to work for several years in exchange for housing and rations. Jesse Robertson, who wrote an article about the Shelburne riot, notes that, quote, the conditions were startlingly similar to the slavery from which they had escaped, end quote. Unfortunately, as many black loyalists could not read, some were tricked into signing contracts that once again bound them to a life of servitude. Fed up with their mistreatment, Thomas Peters was sent to London in 1790 with a list of grievances. There he met the Sierra Leone Company, a group of abolitionists who established a colony of free slaves in Africa. Peters returned to Nova Scotia, offering free transport.
all right, so anyway, we'll be more worried about, you know, people like our people, you know.
sea, watching ships come and go from bustling New England ports. But opportunities for African Americans were limited. Most black men in America at the time were enslaved or forced into low-paying labor. Yet, Cuff had something many others didn't: a dream and the will to chase it. A self-taught sailor and entrepreneur, at just 16 years old, Cuff took his first job aboard a whaling ship. He quickly learned how to navigate the open ocean, read charts, and understand the secrets of sailing. However, he soon faced a harsh truth. African Americans were often barred from owning ships, receiving fair wages, or trading freely. Instead of accepting this, Cuff took matters into his own hands. He built his first small boat and began working as a merchant, fishing and trading goods along the New England coast. Despite being harassed by pirates and restricted by discriminatory laws, he continued to expand his business. By his early 20s, he had built a fleet of ships, hiring both African American and Native American sailors, offering them fair wages, and training them in navigation, something unheard of at the time. Fighting for black rights and education, Paul Cuff believed that success wasn't just personal, it had to be shared. He saw how black communities were often denied education and economic opportunities, so he used his wealth to fund schools for African American children. He also fought for the right of free black men to vote. In 1780, he and his brother petitioned the Massachusetts government, arguing that if they had to pay taxes, they should have the right to vote. Though their petition was rejected, it was one of the first recorded efforts by African Americans to demand voting rights.
And now we know that there is no such thing as lesser of two evils. So we're not in the 1700s now, are we? Now, it would make sense if this was 1776, but since it's not, it doesn't make sense anymore.
A Vision for Africa, the Sierra Leone Project. Paul Cuff believed that black people needed economic independence and that Africa could be a land of opportunity for freed African Americans. He funded and led one of the first efforts to return African Americans to Africa, focusing on Sierra Leone, a British colony meant for freed slaves. In 1815, he personally financed and captained a voyage that carried 38 free black men, women, and children to Sierra Leone, helping them establish homes and businesses.
All right, all right. And shouts out to Paul Cuffy, you know what I'm saying? Let's see. Damn. See.
On March 23, 1991, a small but heavily armed group of rebels, calling themselves the Revolutionary United Front RUF, crossed the border from Liberia into Sierra Leone. Their goal, to overthrow the Sierra Leonean
Haven't even got to Liberia yet.
was corrupt, elitist, and neglectful of ordinary citizens. They entered through Bomaru, a quiet
See, this
town
is
near
why
the
we have to have context to a lot of these conversations, but is all history is super jumbled up to this point now. So yeah. I guess I don't know.
To it. And what I mean by that is more that you see the effects of colonialism, you see the effects more American in Africa. Is there racism? What about tribalism? How did it all affect me? Stay tuned and find out. Before I went, what it would be like. Some people wonder, is it kind of this, you make it sound like it's this wonderful magical experience, everybody's getting along, everybody is so welcoming. You see different videos and people explaining when they went back and how they felt. So what is it really like on a practical level? I want to explain. Now, part of it, yeah, it is kind of like that. At least on the inside, that's how I felt. It felt refreshing to be in a country full of African people. It felt really refreshing to every day wake up to cultural things that I appreciated. things that I think we have in common and we don't even realize that we have in common. So those things were exciting to me, and it is really kind of, there is a little bit of magic to it. But then what is it really like for you as an African American? Are you accepted? Are you considered one of them? How does that all work together? So there's a lot of aspects to that. One question that I got is there racism in Africa? Or is it just a place that's free of that you don't have to worry about that evil? And my answer would be yes and no. So in America, racism comes in the form of a lightning bolt, meaning that when it hits you, you know it. It's deadly, it's dangerous, it's shocking, and you know it when it happens. So what I mean by that is that it's more of that one-on-one encounter when you see it. While in Africa, I would illustrate it more to be like a rain cloud, wherein it's not kind of that one-on-one thing, but it's become just a darkness over the whole country that's dimming the light, that people don't even realize. They just get used to it. And what I mean by that is more that you see the effects of colonialism. You see the effects more globally on the scale of the whole country's economy. And people don't realize that. They tend to blame themselves. I will hear people say, well, the country is not better, the country is doing this, doing that. And half of the things they're describing are not the country's fault, but for the fact the country's only been independent
Except for letting a white man
under
in, a
60
white boy.
years. Think about that. Just under 60 years, they were a colony. So now for them to have gained so much traction is not really reasonable. The effects of colonialism are very strong, and I think it's something that tends to be forgotten in the eyes of people, and it's not something that I forgot. So when I was there, I would see different things I was surprised by. From my perspective, as an American, I was used to America being able to do anything and everything. In fact, if America outsources something, I assume it's not because they can't do it, but because it's cheaper to outsource it. While in Africa, a lot of times the attitude I was getting, the answer I was getting when I said, well, why can't they make that here? Why can't they do that here? Why do they outsource it? The attitude was more, we don't know how. We're not able to do that. And that always hurt my heart, because I'm like, my experience is that you all are very capable. The ingenuity in Africa is off the charts. The things that people are able to do with so little is way more than we're able to do in America. So I would just kind of get that general understanding.
Yeah, and I guess we can look up the sister video here. Anyway, let's go back and finish this last part, y'all. Then I'm gonna get off of here.
That much better. Now, even though during the
So the
war,
other lesser of two
they said
evils.
they were offering freedom to anyone who helped them fight. After it was over, places like Connecticut and Rhode Island passed gradual emancipation laws. They tried to make it seem like, you come fight, you do well, you're free. But no, now what they're saying is, we'll gradually emancipate you. And even then, the law only
Just wait till the
applied to
next
children
election.
who were born
Then you can
after
focus on. We got to save democracy
1784.
right now.
And even those children would not be free until the women turned 21 and the men turned 25. Right? And I think some places it
Yeah,
was
thanks, my
18
brother.
for women and 21 for men. So pretty much gradual emancipation means you're going to be a slave your entire childhood. And the crazy part is Rhode Island supposedly had banned slavery in 1652. And you know what? Most of the wealthy, rich white families in Rhode Island were heavily involved in the slave trade, including the Brown family that the Ivy League school is named after, Brown University, which was started by this white dude named Nicholas Brown and his brother or something like that.
It was 15 years ago that Brown University first released its landmark Slavery and Justice Report, which documented how the school's founder and others who helped build up the school profited from the slave trade. It laid out recommendations for the university to move forward from its past and also started conversations at higher education institutes across the nation about their complicated histories with race and slavery. Now, 15 years later, Brown is releasing a follow-up report with new insights into the original findings and new assessments as to how far the university has come and how far it has to go to address and make up for its past.
Now, all of these colonial colleges were built by slaves and were funded by the slave trade, including Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, William and Mary, Columbia, Rutgers, and the University of Pennsylvania. And some of these colleges were even started on plantations.
Did you know that the Ivy League has profited off of the slave trade for a long time? Let's talk about it. Let's start with Brown. So Brown was named after the Brown brothers, who gave a lot of money to the university. Two of these brothers traded enslaved people, and one of them ran a factory. The University Hall at Brown was built in part by labor of enslaved people. Also, at least 30 members of Brown's governing board also owned slave ships. Now let's talk about the fucked up shit that happened at Dartmouth. Yeah, this is dark. So, the founder of Dartmouth, he actually used the bodies of enslaved people as experimental tools at the university. He would literally boil enslaved people's bodies in order to separate the skeleton and then wire it up to be used in classrooms. Yale isn't out of this either. Yale used a lot of money from trading enslaved people, and this was used to build their library, to hire professors, and to give out scholarships. Princeton would recruit students from rich families that owned enslaved people. In the 1700s, literally the majority of students at Princeton were the sons of slave owners or traders. And Princeton was not the only university that did this. There was also Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Rutgers, Brown, Dartmouth, and the University of Delaware. Let me go to my notes for this part. So Princeton's first 9 university presidents from 1747 to 1854 owned enslaved people, and many of them during their time as president. Also, many of the professors at Princeton owned enslaved people. So in 1776, there was enslaved people in the possession of Samuel Finley, and he was the Princeton president at the time. And when he died, these enslaved people in his possession were literally auctioned off on campus for an entire fucking month. And Rutgers isn't any different. Rutgers' first president, Jacob Hardenberg, he had ownership of Sojourner Truth, the same Sojourner Truth. Rutgers also had the defense of enslavement inside their curriculum. They basically used this curriculum to provide flawed justification for the free labor of Black people, the absolute power of slave owners, and the separation of races.
So now, after the war was over, right, a lot of...
Oh, and I know that was just a side story there, you know what I'm saying? But, I mean...
New at 6.
Because we still want to go to their schools and be a part of their system and stuff, you know what I'm saying?
Along with a former classmate saying he was subjected to sexual and racial abuse.
The school and the former classmate denied the allegations, and Eyewitness News reporter Rob McMillan has the story.
18-year-old Aiden Romaine has dreams of one day playing water polo in the Olympics. Part of that dream led him to play at Harvard Westlake School in Studio City. But he says his days there were hell.
It was very difficult on a daily basis to deal with the racial abuse and the sexual abuse.
Romaine, who says he's now living in Barcelona, Spain because things were so bad, has now filed a lawsuit, not only against the school, but one of its former players, Luca Vanderwood.
The racial abuse and the sexual abuse was a daily basis thing. It would happen in nearly every training. It would happen many times, daily.
According to the lawsuit, the abuse was not spontaneous. It was part of a years-long culture in which violence and humiliation were normalized and facilitated through the school's coaching staff and administration. Romaine's attorney details the allegations.
Ranging from Aiden being called the N-word
to being literally whipped with exercise bands in a weight room, supposedly reenacting slavery.
As far as the sexual assault allegations, they're alleged to have occurred at the hands of Vanderwood, not only in the weight room, but underwater in the pool.
The core of the lawsuit is that the school failed to protect Aiden. They failed to report the assaults as they were occurring to law enforcement.
According to the lawsuit, Romaine's parents notified the school of the allegations in February of last year by email. But in a letter from the school's attorney, at no time was the alleged sexual assault ever reported. Harvard Westlake telling Eyewitness News, quote, Harvard Westlake will not offer specific comment other than to say it unequivocally disputes many of these allegations that mischaracterize facts and the school's actions. The school treated reports of inappropriate behavior in its water polo program with urgency and seriousness, promptly initiating an investigation and complying with its mandatory reporting obligations. Vanderwood's attorney telling Eyewitness News, quote, we do not intend to litigate this matter in the media. Mr. Vanderwood's denials and other responses will be clear and unambiguous in his defense.
You know what? Jesus Christ. I'm not even going to say nothing. Where is Cassidra when you need her? Now, like I said, this is a side story, but imagine if we had started looking at history from our own perspective.
Black students took from that message is that metaphorically, returning to the womb
Like physically.
Black
Jesus.
instruction is tantamount.
I'm sorry. I'm going to run it back. I'm sorry.
The thing I hope Black students took from that message is that metaphorically, returning to the womb of Black instruction is tantamount to stepping into heaven. See, that speech was really to tell Black kids. That speech was really to tell Black kids, there's no other schools better. There are no other schools better. I don't care about no Ivy League. None of that matters. None of that matters because we built their schools and then out. I mean, it's very, very important. You know, Du Bois went to Harvard because Fisk prepared him, right? It wasn't the other way around. Fisk gets the glory. This is extremely important. This is legally important to understand, right? And the other thing that I hope Black people in general get is that we can celebrate and should celebrate and uplift and extol the beauty of Blackness without ever having to mention whiteness. Because one of the things I did in this speech, I never mentioned white people because there was no need to. But it's not a hatred either. There was absolutely no need to. And so I did not. But when I was saying, here they come, y'all, here they come, right? It made me think of, you know, when the saints go marching in, right? And our young people are those saints. You know, our ancestors are the saints. And so one by one, here we come. And I don't care what America does, we just keep on coming. They lynched us and we keep on coming. They hosed us down the streets and we keep on coming. They beat us, we keep on coming. They rape us, we keep on coming.
Wait, why? What the hell? Why would we keep going trying to be a part of that? I don't understand. I ain't into what he said, but what the hell? They did all that and we keep trying to be a part of that shit. That's crazy.
I close the school, we open another one. Listen, you're not going to destroy the ant because the ant is building while you're asleep.
Okay, so
Extremely important.
we'll be a part of that. But all right. I'm gonna wrap. We ain't gonna get too much farther, y'all. I'm about to wrap it up. But I want to play one last part before I go.
America's focus was on colonizing more land to the west. And even though North Carolina passed laws against importing slaves into their state, right, and that's from other states or wherever, but even though North Carolina passed that law, there was starting to be a debate about whether slavery should be allowed in these new territories they're about to go conquer or not. Now, like I told you last time, you could tell a lot about a group of people about who they choose to be their leaders, right? And they chose a pedophile rapist, you know, like Thomas Jefferson, to create their land ordinance. We keep on coming. 1784. Now, Congress rejected Thomas Jefferson ordinance because it banned slavery in the new territories after 1800. Now, even though you might hear some other people refer to Thomas Jefferson as some abolitionist who spoke against slavery, right? Good old TJ. But him speaking against slavery was not for some moralistic reason, right? He had slaves and didn't even get rid of his own. But like I told you last time with Benjamin Franklin, a lot of that stuff comes from white nationalist talking points because they wanted to be a white and tawny, aka red Indian nation. And they felt that the Negro should not be here, which is funny because they never released their own slaves. So, we already know about the hypocrisy with them though. Thomas Jefferson said Negroes are inferior, and he only supported abolishing slavery if Negroes were educated and assimilated into white society. But he also thought that we were mentally incapable of being educated. So we don't even meet his mark to abolish slavery. In a letter to Patrick Henry, he said, Negroes were so far mentally inferior, we're incapable of producing a single poet. Right? And he constantly took shots at Phyllis Wheatley, a Black woman who proved them wrong.
We're going to read as Thomas Jefferson tells
Facts,
us
my brother.
about the Negro slave in the early American colonies.
Well, I mean, he's a
particularly
European,
in the
so.
state of Virginia. And I begin. It will probably be asked, why not retain and incorporate the blacks into the state and thus save the expense of supplying by importation of white settlers the vacancies they will leave? Deep-rooted prejudices entertained by the whites, 10,000 recollections by the blacks of the injuries they have sustained, new provocation.
And let me tell you, Negroes ain't recollect nothing. We still ain't recollecting nothing.
The real distinctions which nature has made and many other circumstances will divide us into parties and produce convulsions, which will probably never end but in the extermination of one or the other race. To these objections, which are political, may be added others, which are physical and moral. The first difference which strikes us is that of color. Whether the black of the Negro resides in the reticular membrane between the skin and the scarf skin, or in the...
Now, Thomas Jefferson told you there's only one solution. He told you this, right? You want to be American? That's what your forefather told you. It can only result in the extinction of one or the other.
Scarf skin itself, whether it proceeds from the color of the blood, the color of the bile, or from that of some other secretion. The difference is fixed in nature and is as real as if its seat and cause were better known to us. And is this...
Yeah, so pretty much you're dealing with a Neanderthal creature is a different species than you, It's like you could tell by the stringy, lice-infested hair, right? The inability to go out into the sun without putting a cream on their skin, right? The psychopathic behavior, right? The fact that they put pedophiles, they carved the faces of pedophiles into the side of a mountain, you know what I'm saying? And called them their fathers, right? They come from a culture that made statues of little babies. They carved naked babies, you know what I'm saying? Boy babies at that. Never girl babies, but always boy babies that was naked, right? This is their culture that they come from. There is no reasoning with the psychopath, you know what I'm saying? And yet, so there is a mixture that cannot happen, you know what I mean? No matter how much love that you have in your heart, no matter how much you pray to whoever God you're praying to, it has not worked so far, right? Because there is a difference, you know what I'm saying?
difference of no importance? Is it not the foundation of a greater or less share of beauty in the two races? Are not the fine mixtures of red and white the expressions of every passion by greater or less effusions of color in the one, preferable to that eternal monotony which reigns in the countenances, that immovable veil of black which covers the emotions of the other race? Add to these flowing hair, a more elegant symmetry of form, their own judgment in favor of the whites declare.
Lice infested hair. I'm good with the hair I have, buddy. But this is what I'm saying, right? You can look at a white bitch and see that it's a white bitch. I can look at a sister and see like, yo, no matter how you feel about it, Michelle Obama is the most beautiful first lady ever by far. right? Because you can see the clear differences, right? Like now, the mindset that we have as Negro race, you know what I'm saying? That's something different. I'm just saying, right? But now I don't call them orangutans or apes or monkeys or anything like that because usually apes and stuff don't molest their own children, and like apes don't be like, hey, let me kill this whole school of other monkeys or whatever. They don't do that kind of stuff. They don't be like, hey, let me kill my whole family of monkeys or whatever. They don't do that. You know what I'm saying? Only the Neanderthal species does that. You understand? So they even know this because they denied black women soap, but they chose to rape a unwilling participant, a black woman unwilling to be with them. They chose to try to rape her as opposed to the disgusting white bitch that they could have. And the white bitch was so jealous about that, right? Which is why we know that they're part of the most dangerous species that existed, you know what I'm saying? Because it goes beyond their tears. But anyway, let me finish. I'm sorry.
Shared by their preference of them as uniformly as is the preference of the orangutan for the black woman over those of his own species. The circumstance of superior beauty is thought worthy of attention in the propagation of our horses, dogs, and other domestic animals. Why not in that of man? They, the
Now, peep that, because we all know how they like to sleep with animals and stuff like that. So this is European standards. This is why we have to learn how to go by our own standards. You know what I'm saying? Because they are attracted to horses and dogs and domestic, quote unquote, domesticated animals that they let sleep in their bed with them.
animals. Why not in that of man? They, the blacks, have less hair on the face and body. They secrete less
Yeah, we don't have fur.
and are more by the glands of the skin, which gives them a very strong and disagreeable odor. This greater degree of transpiration renders them more tolerant of heat and less so of cold than the whites. They,
Now, because he come from a damn mountain with no sun and they used to eat each other, right, and don't take baths, their stench is so bad that they think smelling good is not right. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that we can go outside in the sun, they didn't have stuff that they could put on their skin back then, you see? And so he was super jealous, you know what I'm saying? You could go, like today, I can go to a beach like on a nice day like today, you know what I'm saying? The sun was out. I could have went to the beach. I ain't have to put nothing on my skin. They probably would have died. You know what I'm saying? They did die in a lot of cases, you know, but anyway.
that is, the blacks, seem to require less sleep. A black, after hard labor through the day, will be induced by the slightest amusements to sit up until midnight or later, though knowing he must be out with the first dawn of the morning. This may perhaps proceed.
Now, I know y'all want to call some of y'all slaves now, but you see that right now. You be like, because y'all be like, I can't stay up late. I got to get up in the morning. And so he like, y'all the smart ones. You know you got to go work for some white boy in the morning. He know you a damn slave. He said the stupid ones is those of us who stay up late at night plotting our damn freedom and how to get up out of this and talking about all the stuff that we talk about. Now, I will say he is right about we do be jamming. That's all we do is jam all the time. But those of us who is up late at night to discuss our freedom strategy, who know we slaves, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, we stay up. But the rest of you, you know what I'm saying, y'all will be deemed good by good old TJ because y'all go to sleep knowing y'all gotta get up at 4 in the morning to go make him some money while he sleep.
Or later, though knowing he must be out with the first dawn of the morning. This may perhaps proceed from a want of forethought, which prevents their seeing a danger till it be present. When present, they do not go through it with more coolness or steadiness than the whites. They, the blacks, are more ardent after their female, but love seems with them to be more an eager desire than a tender, delicate mixture of sentiment and sensation. Their griefs are transient. Those numberless afflictions, which render it doubtful whether heaven has given life to us in mercy or in wrath, are less felt and sooner forgotten with them. In general, their existence appears to participate more of sensation than reflection. In reason, much inferior, as I think one could scarcely be found capable of tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid. And in imagination, they are dull, tasteless, and anomalous. It would be unfair.
Funny why they steal all of their stuff from us. Now the problem is we let them let them make money, but you see how low their IQ is and how much they project, right?
To follow them to Africa for this investigation, we will consider them here on the same stage with the whites. It will be right to make great allowances for the difference of condition, of education, of conversation, of the sphere in which they move. Many millions of them have been brought to and born in America. Most of them, indeed, have been confined to tillage, to their own homes, and to their own society. But never yet could I find that a black had uttered a thought above the level of plain narration, never saw even an elementary trait of painting or sculpture. In music, they are more generally gifted than the whites, with accurate ears for tune and time, and they have been found capable of imagining a small catch. Whether they will be equal to the composition of a more extensive run of melody or of complicated harmony is yet to be proved. Misery is often the parent of the most affecting touches in poetry. Among the blacks is misery enough, God knows, but no poetry. I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in the endowments both of body and mind. This unfortunate difference of color and perhaps of faculty is a powerful obstacle in the emancipation of these people.
Now, let's be real. Some of y'all feel like Phyllis Wheatley couldn't have existed because it was a black woman who could be a poet, right? But anyway, not all places were even
Or Harriet Tubman, for that matter. But I mean, I guess we could stop here because we'll go more on the American lesser of two evils next time. But now that one who passed all of this judgment, he himself was a damn pedophile. Ain't that something? So why would we care
What's the
what a
difference
pedophile
between
thinks?
Thomas Jefferson and Jeffrey Epstein? One is remembered as a founding father, the other as one of the most hated men in modern history. Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, but he also had a secret relationship with an enslaved girl on his plantation. They had several children together. Epstein is condemned for exploiting young girls. Jefferson is celebrated as a hero. The actions look similar. The judgment is not. The real difference isn't really what they did, it's when they did it. Jefferson helped write the rules of it.
Now, you know, a white boy came on here and was like, oh, that was the time that it was. So I was like, yo, so if it was 200 years ago, would you be with since you like 40 something, would you mess with a 12-year-old? And I think he said,
Here's the
yeah,
harsh
to be
truth.
honest with you.
Jeffrey Epstein had been around in 1776. Historians wouldn't call him a monster. He'd probably be a complicated historical individual. Compare Epstein to Thomas Jefferson, the third president, author of the Declaration of Independence, and also somebody who kept 600 people in chains for their entire life, a 14-year-old, and fathered 6 children with her. He's on the rare but real $2 bill.
No, she had a baby at 14, 13. That's what y'all be saying, like, oh, he did it at 13. That's when she had a baby. You know, she got pregnant at 13. Not the first time that he probably was doing what he was doing to her, you know, being a pedophile.
Or consider George Washington, the first president, leader of the Continental Army, several hundred people in bondage, and whose adopted son did the same thing Jefferson did. Now, we'll never know if George Washington himself did what Jefferson did because he was infertile. Washington's on the $1 bill. But before you lose all hope, remember, founding fathers weren't all bad. Benjamin Franklin famously
See
wrote
this?
a letter to a young male.
Now, we already talked about how Benjamin Franklin was the first original white nationalist and his nonsense. You see how this is why I be trying to tell y'all about because they done told you one thing that you want to hear, and then they try to throw in some BS on top of that, and then you come back to me, well, there is some good ones now. Benjamin Franklin was an abolitionist. John Brown, And Harriet Tubman was like, John Brown, get the hell out of my face. I ain't trying to hear none of that stuff you talking about. You know what I'm saying? They don't tell you that part. She was like, hell no, I ain't helping your ass, boy. They don't tell you that. Like, why was she fighting for everybody but didn't help John Brown? That's a good. Why did she turn John Brown down? Because she was smart. She understood. Ain't no good white ones. What are you talking about? I know how they operate. Her vision, like maybe we need to get hit in the head like she did, so we can see the vision too.
Or you lose all hope. Remember, founding
All
fathers.
hopes must be lost if that's
Yeah,
the case.
Benjamin Franklin famously wrote a letter to a young male friend advising him to only have affairs with older women. Point 8 of the
Oh,
letter
only rape older
says,
women.
they are so grateful. This is, of course, why he made it on the $100 bill. What bill do you think Epstein might have made it on if he were a founding father?
Probably the $5 bill. I don't know. What's the difference between any of them? But one thing that we do know is that genetic superiority that is talked about, right? Because we can see it to this very day, you know?
And bitch, do something about it. Stop playing me before I beat your ass. Stop playing me before I beat the fuck out of you. Stop playing me. Stop playing me before I beat the fuck out of you. Stop fucking playing me before I beat the fuck out of you. I'ma show your ass a nigga. I'ma show your ass a nigga. I'ma show your ass a nigga. Say it again. Say it again, bitch. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Cause you won't fucking look at her. Look at us. Don't scream that, bitch. Don't scream that, bitch. Come here, nothing nigga. What? Fucking dumbass.
God.
Stop playing with me. I bet you don't play with nobody else, ho. Call me another nigga. Nah, bitch. Call me another nigga. Look at her. Look at her. Call me another. Call me another nigga. Call me another. Fucking nigga, you don't belong here. Bitch, do something about it.
So I guess that's superiority, that genetic superiority that was talked about. You know. But anyway, man, shouts out to all of y'all for listening. Shouts out to my brother Anthony in the building. Shouts out to Matron. Shouts out to Raw. And y'all subscribe to Matron. Make sure y'all listen. It's definitely reading good books and all of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So make sure y'all subscribe to her. Shouts out to my brother Koku and Bitter Medicine and all of them. And shouts out to Cassidra. We'll get more onto the American lesser of two evils side next time. But you know, you see how history repeats itself all the time over and over. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, all I can say is this, you know. So shouts out to Harriet Tubman, you know. So
Anybody in here know who Harriet Tubman is? Y'all know who Harriet Tubman is? Harriet Tubman said this. Harriet Tubman said, I freed hundreds of slaves. Did she say that? She said, but I could have freed thousands if they would have knew they were slaves. And she meant that, man. She meant that. Do y'all know how many slaves she lost on the Underground Railroad? Not a single one. That's powerful.
very powerful. Very powerful. And I've lost several already. And I ain't even have half a harder time to do it as she did. But y'all still argue with me. I ain't no slave. But if you knew that you were, then we could maybe be free. But since you don't, we're probably doomed. So as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're gonna keep falling for anything.